What's up, Professor Wergeles here. We're finishing up the Switch Scenes lecture. We're going to take a look at the next zip example, which is SwitcherExample.zip. Go ahead and download the zip file and load it into NetBeans. Let's take a look at it. So we're going to open it up. And this is going to be this Switcher example. I reference this a lot in the announcements and in other videos as the Switchable project, because the Switchable is the main class. So the project is actually called SwitcherExample, but I usually reference it as Switchable a lot. So if I ever say Switchable, this is the lecture that I'm talking about. Now I've abstracted this. So if I have 3 scenes, 4 scenes, 5 scenes, 10 scenes, 20 scenes, it doesn't matter. You can have as many scenes as you want. And that's why this code set is a little bit better to use. Now, first, let's take a look at this abstract class. So this is an abstract class. Check this out. Instead of switching scenes and having to worry about creating a scene for every fxml file, I have a static scene. Now remember what the static keyword does. So static tells the compiler that there's only one memory location associated with this class. So if I create 20 instances, 20 objects, I'll still only have one scene. Now this is an abstract class. And you'll notice there's no abstract methods in this class. The reason I make this abstract is because I don't want this class instantiable, which means I don't want you to create an instance of it. I don't want you to create an object. I don't want you to load this into memory. Those are all the same thing. So I put it as abstract, and an abstract class cannot be instantiated. I also have a static hash map. This hash map controls everything. You'll notice I have a string, which is the key, and the value is a type switchable. So if you look at the add method, okay, first I'm going to see if the key value pair is in the hash map. If it's not in the hash map, so if it's equal to null, I'm going to do something similar to the main method, which is what we normally saw. So you're not going to see it here, but if I go back to the Switch Scenes lecture, okay, you're going to see it in the main method here. So a problem with this code, and a lot of students want to use this example because it's really simple, but a problem with this code is I keep writing the same code over and over again. So I wrote it here in the main method. I had to write it here in controller 1. If I go to controller 2 and I want to go to controller 3, I have to write it again. And all of a sudden, I'm writing the same code over and over again, which is not a good programming practice. You will get points deducted on your final project. So what I did was I made a class, and no matter how many scenes or controllers you create with associated models, this code will only be written once. And that's how you need to think about your final project. If you see yourself writing the same code over and over again, that's a problem. Either make a function or put it into its own class, which is what we did here. So we only need to write this once. So I'm basically going to copy the main method, exact same main method like we did before, and I'm going to put it here in the switchable class. So I'm going to create a loader object. Once I have the loader object, I can load the root, okay, which is a parent, a type parent. Remember, parent is the superclass for all JavaFX containers. And from the loader, I can call the load method, which is what we did before. Although I recommend doing an explicit cast here. The reason to do an explicit cast is it'll ensure that it is of type parent, because this may actually be a a V box or an H box or an anchor pane or a stack pane or a grid pane. So I'm going to explicitly cast it to a parent. If it's not of type parent, which it should always be, then you'll get a runtime error. Okay, I want this to make sure it's of type parent. So I'm going to put an explicit cast there. You'll want to know explicit and implicit casting, okay, for the final exam. Those are very important things. Make sure you go back over them. And then what do we do next? Okay, what do we do next? We grab the controller. Why? So I could pass the stage over to it. So I go back to switchable. I actually have the controller here. Controllers of type switchable. So that's an important thing. In order for this program to work, every controller needs to be of type switchable. So I need to extend the switchable class. which we'll get to here in a little bit. So I have the controller. I've already created it. It's a variable up here. If it's in the hash map, it will return it. If it's not, it'll be null. So I'll say controller is equal to, and I'll use the loader again. So I'll say loader.get controller, which is what we've been doing. And I also recommend an explicit cast here. Normally, when you get a controller, it's going to return type A controller, B controller, C controller, whatever the controller's name is. But I want to put that into type switchable. So make sure it works by doing an explicit cast. Okay, so I'm going to use another explicit cast here. Now, in this previous example, I didn't put the explicit cast there, although it is recommended. There should have been 2 explicit casts here, which is what we did in the threads lecture. That other example was just a quick example to show you how to switch scenes. Quick and easy example. This is the best programming practices way and the code that you should use for your final project. And then what do? Okay, once we have the controller, if I switch back over here, you'll see I create a scene and then I set the stage with the corresponding scene and then I show the stage. But in this example, I'm not going to be switching the scenes. What I'm going to do is actually switch the root on the scene. If you remember back in the lectures for the JavaFX architecture, okay, this is actually on tutorials point, but it's from the Oracle docs. Do you remember this graph? I have the 3 levels. So I have the stage, I have the scene, and then I have the scene graph, which is represented by the root. Okay, so if I go back to the main class, this should probably make more sense now that we're later in the semester. So I have the scene, I have the root, and I have the stage. Okay, so the lowest level is the stage. I have that here. And then on the stage, I have a scene, which I have here. And then on the scene, I have the root. And on the root, I have all the other elements. So if I open up page 1 and do an edit, you'll see I have an anchor pane. And on the anchor pane, I have a label. And on the anchor pane, I have a button and another label. Okay, so this is the hierarchy tree that you'll see on this here. So I have an anchor pane, I have a label, then I have a button, and I have another label. Okay, so you can imagine the tree. And then on the label, I have text. And on the button, I have text. And I have an on-click listener. So you can imagine this tree-like structure being created. So on the first application, we switched out the scene. So I did stage.setScene. On this application, I'm doing scene.setRoot. So I can do either one. I can either switch the scenes out or I can switch the root out and I'll change the entire contents of this scene. Now, what's nice about actually switching the scene's root, I have a static scene, so it's a little bit easier to keep track of. I don't need to keep track of all these scenes. All I need to do is grab the fxml file, grab the root, and then set the root on the scene. That way I don't have to keep changing the scene on the stage. It's similar, but this is a little bit of a more simplistic design, which will result in less errors. So it's very similar to what we did here where we're setting the scene, except here we're setting the root and we'll only have one scene. So it will allow you to have less bugs in your program. So here I'll do a set root. And you'll see I grab the root from the fxml file here. The name will be dynamic, whatever's in the hash map. So whatever's in the hash map, the string will be the name. And then it'll actually grab the controller. And then if this controller is null, which means it's not in the hash map, we're going to go ahead and put it in the hash map. So here I'll have controller dot put. I'm going to put the name of the scene as well as the actual controller itself. Okay, controllers is with an S because that's the hash map. Now what's cool about this is in the other example, I had to keep passing the stage. I had to grab the stage from the main and I had to pass it to controller 1. And then I had to pass it to controller 2. And we have to pass the stage throughout the entire program. With this example, I don't need to. I have one stage and I have one scene, and all I need to do is grab the scene, grab the root, and switch the root on that specific scene. Okay, so it's really nice the way that this is set up. You'll see I have an IO exception in case I can't find this file. Based off of the current class, I'm going to try to get the resource. All I need to do is provide the name. So if I want to switch to A, I'll just pass in A. I don't need to pass in the entire extension because all the files should be fxml. And then I also did the thing that I recommended, which is to put the general exception here. So if any other exceptions occur, I'll also catch that as well. And then I'm going to return the controller. You'll see I have a switch to method. Let's implement that. So switch to is first going to look in the hash map. And all the controllers are going to be of type switchable. That way I can store all the controllers in one hash map. Think if I had to put all these different types like A controller, B controller, C controller, I wouldn't be able to store all of them. If I put A controller here, then B controller wouldn't work. So I'm going to use the superclass as a type. That way I can put all the subclasses in here into the hash map. So based off the hash map, I'm going to look for the name. If the controller is equal to null, which means it's not there, I'm going to add it. I'm going to call the add method, which is what we just wrote. I'm going to pass over the name. And if it's not equal to null, which means it's there, and as long as the scene has been created, as long as this scene is not equal to null, that's very important, then I'm going to say scene.setRoot. I'm going to grab the controller, get root. Okay, you'll see up here I have controller.setRoot. So right before I put it in the hash map, I set the root of the controller. You'll see that here in the fxml file. So if I go over here to the fxml file, you'll see here's the root and here's the controller. Okay, so I have that corresponding information. So whenever I want to switch to, you'll see this is a static method. And I made it static because I'm accessing a static variable. Normally, if you have a static field, you'll also have a static method. There's no reason to have one memory location for the variable and several memory locations for the method. If you have one memory location for the field, you should also have one memory location for the method. So I'll say scene.setRoot. That way I don't need to pass the stage throughout the entire program. And I have a few other methods called setRoot, getRoot, and getController by name. Okay, you'll see root is actually an instance field. So it's not a static field because I'll have a bunch of different roots for each controller. So that's why these methods are also not static. So whenever I access a static field, the method is normally static as well. Now, in order for this to work, we need to switch up the main method. We're not going to do it the same way we've done it before, where we pass the stage and have to pass it throughout the entire program. So the main method is going to look a little bit different. All we need to do is create a scene. That's it. We don't need to pass over the stage anymore. I'm going to show you how to do this in the next video. So stick with Professor Wergeles, and we'll see you in the next video.